Welcome to lesson 8 of our computer systems unit. In this lesson we will look at the buses and how data travels between the components within our computer system. As with every lesson, we have some learning intentions. By the end of the lesson, we'll be able to describe what a bus is, explain what the buses do, explain what each line on the bus does, and describe how lines work together to carry out operations. Again, we have a series of success criteria which should be referred to on a regular basis as you go through the lesson. In this case, I can describe what a bus is, I can explain what the buses do, I can explain what each line on the bus does, and I can describe how those lines work together to carry out an operation. So let's start off by explaining what a bus is. A bus is an electronic line that connects components together. They are used to transmit data between the different parts of the computer system. There are 3 buses that we need to know about. First one is the address bus, the second the data bus, and last but not least the control bus. You should be able to name all 3 of these buses. Let's start off with the address bus. The address bus holds the address of the memory location where data is about to be stored or from which data is about to be read. The more lines we have on the address bus, the more the locations the system can address or have. The address bus can identify clearly where any data or instruction is located due to the fact that every memory location on the system has a unique address. Remember, we looked at this before. It's called memory addressing. The data bus transfers the data or instructions between the processor and the component within the computer system. It's the only bus that actually carries any data or information. It is a two-way bus, which means data can travel to and from the processor. The previous bus, the address bus, is a one-way bus, which means information always goes in one direction, from the processor to memory, whether to gain access to a location to write data to or read data from. The control bus is made up of several different lines and should be thought of as such. Examples of the different lines in there are the read line, the write line, and the interrupt line. If the read line is executed, then the processor is executing a read instruction, which means that it is reading information from a memory location to the processor. If the write line is executed, that means the processor is executing a write instruction, which means that data is being passed from the processor to a memory location. The interrupt line is slightly different. It will interrupt the processor executing an instruction and halt the process. An example of this would maybe perhaps if a printer runs out of paper. Here's a diagram of basic computer architecture. Again, we have our central processing unit and our main memory. We also have our input and output. and we have our 3 buses. Notice the data bus has arrows going in both directions. This is a two-way bus. Our address bus only goes out of the processor, which means the arrow is leaving the processor and going to main memory. Let's talk a little bit about this diagram using an operation as an example. So a memory write operation, which means that we are sending data from our processor to main memory. The address of the memory location we want to access is placed on the address bus. The data we want to send is then placed on the data bus, and the write line is executed within the control bus. The data is then sent and stored within the memory location. The opposite of that would be a read operation, where the address is placed on the address bus of the location we want to access. The data is then placed on the data bus, and the read line is executed, sending the data from the main memory to the processor. There are other parts of these components which carry out jobs during these operations and instructions. We will find out a lot more about those when it comes to higher computing science.